Why is there so much political violence in Mexico? The mayor of a Mexican city was just beheaded days after he was sworn in as the new mayor. His head was propped up on top of a white van while his body lay slumped inside. And right before that, two other colleagues of his were also shot dead, including his secretary and a former Special Forces police commander. But this is not the only example of political violence there, so what's going on? Dig out with me. In June of this year, Mexico had its largest but also bloodiest election in the country's modern history. Mexican politicians often face political violence and attacks around elections because of corruption and the multi-billion-dollar narcotics trade. This year, 37 candidates were murdered in the run-up to the elections, and violence is still unfolding as those elected take office. In fact, the beheading of the mayor took place a day before Mexico's new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, took office. So the question is she going to be able to change this reality on the ground? Well, she's promised to maintain most of the policies from her predecessor, former President Obrador. So right after the beheading, for example, she acknowledged what happened, but she mostly echoed Obrador's, quote, "hugs not bullets" campaign in calling for solutions that address the root causes of crime, like poverty and access to education. And that's important too, of course, but history is showing a mixed track record from these policies. On one hand, experts say the direct militarized approach of the war on drugs in Mexico only increased violence further. In fact, 420,000 murders have been reported since 2006, when Mexico officially declared an all-out war against criminal groups. Sheinbaum's predecessor put an end to this war by being less confrontational with drug cartels, ending the security cooperation with the US, and trying to focus on the well-being of Mexican citizens. And while homicide rates have dropped a bit, they're still historically high, with around 30,000 people murdered each year. But here's where the problem lies. Experts believe that the drop in numbers could be due in part to undercounting and not alerting officials because people have lost faith in the authorities in criminal investigations. In fact, the Mexican think tank Mexico Evalúa reports that 95% of all crimes in Mexico went unsolved in 2022. And that's because of corruption among the authorities, which then creates that lack of faith in them and which gives the drug cartels near total impunity. Except it shouldn't be a zero-sum game. There can be policies that effectively crack down on criminals and the cartels while also having those that better address poverty and education. And this stuff matters because what happens in Mexico as our neighbor affects us here.